Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case may be. I'm Ted Spence. I'm the director of the AvaTax API here. I just want to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your schedule to come and hang out with us and talk AvaTax. Today's topic is about managing exemption certificates in AvaTax. I have with me Bob Maidens, the engineering manager of the Cert Capture team. Bob is joining us from Durham, North Carolina. Bob, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ted. Pleasure to be here.
Great, thanks. And of course, with us as always is Jeff Meisner on the marketing team, who's helping to facilitate these conversations. Jeff, thank you for doing all of the hard work to make these things possible. Jeff is going to be listening to the chat channel and helping as we answer your questions. So this is intended to be an interactive session. We want you all to feel free to ask questions, talk to us, chat about things that are important to you. We have a presentation, but we will make sure to pause every so often. So if you see something you're curious about, please speak up in the chat channel or using the question feature of the webinar. And then Jeff will make sure to let me know when you have questions, and we'll take a moment to answer them. So Bob, how's the weather out in Durham? We actually have a clear day in Seattle today.
I actually was not prepared for the cold snap and did not enjoy my walk from the car park this morning to the office. I was
and you'll notice he uses the phrase car park because Bob is very, very British.
Australian.
So, fantastic guy. I've been working with him for years. He came to us from the Cert Capture team, which built all of the exemption certificate functionality that we've incorporated into AvaTax. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started briefly. What is an exemption certificate? So a lot of you may know this because this is a pretty common topic. It is a document that you get from the government that says that you don't pay tax. Now, most of you are familiar with the concept of a resale certificate, but oh my goodness, when Bob started teaching me this stuff, there are so many other types of certificates, I had no idea. Bob, I don't even know. Have you ever counted how many types of certificates there are?
I mean, it all depends on which state, and then some states select the universal standard one, and it's I can't remember off the top of my head how many we actually have on file, but it's a lot.
Well, and the other thing that I'm always amazed by is you keep telling me there are people who use Cert Capture to store all sorts of documents, not just exemption certificates, but a whole bunch of other documents and anything that they need for compliance purposes, right?
Mm-hmm. We support excise licensing and federal withholding, and we're definitely looking to expand into other different types.
Great. Well, one of the great things that you'll see about the Cert Capture API today, about the functionality for certificates in AvaTax, is that it's very open-ended. And I think this is a big credit to Bob's team that's been working on this for many years now. I want to mention one of the things I'm always fascinated by is the concept of a direct pay certificate. I've never worked for a large enough company where this has been a big deal, but there are some companies out there that go to the government and they say, we don't want to pay sales tax at all. We will just pay you all of the use tax for everything that we buy. So whenever they order something, even if it's from Home Depot or Staples or anywhere, like whatever it is they purchase, they don't pay tax on it at the time of purchase. They pay tax on it in their monthly use taxes. And it's just a fascinating different world. The only key thing that I want to mention here is that all of the exemption certificates are issued by a tax authority. People can't just create their own documents. And this is why I know you guys provide a verification process. Could you give people a rough description of how the verification process of Cert Capture works?
Sure. So we have a whole UI in place to make sure that the particular certificate that has been filled in is valid for that particular exempt reason and for that particular state. So we don't really want people, sending in Florida resale ones for North Carolina. So that would be an invalid certificate.
Bob, are you breaking up there?
Possibly.
You still there?
Can you hear me all right? Yeah, I'm still there.
All right, sorry about that.
No, where did you get to?
Sorry, you were just explaining about the certificate verification.
Yeah, so we had a nice UI that you can actually go in and say, hey, what is the certificate? Has it been filled out correctly? Is all the boxes ticked? Has it been signed? Is it the correct certificate? Is the tax IDs on the certificate? Are they valid for that state? All that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we do want to mention this used to be the kind of thing that companies had to do themselves. And CertCapture provides some professional services and some support that can really help you with this. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. If anyone who's on the call, if you're interested in these advanced features, I do want to mention, talk to your customer account manager, because there's a ton of services that Avalara provides that can really make life easier for you. So really, what I want to point out is that the whole purpose of this certificate tracking is to give you defense in the case of an audit. If you get audited and you get asked to prove that you're charging tax of the correct people, you're going to be asked to give copies of all of your certificates, and CertCapture makes that easy. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. Let's start talking a little bit about what it is you need to know in order to handle certificates correctly. We've got a variety of different topics here, but we're going to touch on each one, and we'd love to hear your questions, so please feel free to speak up. First thing I'd like to mention is there's an interesting concept called exposure zones. Bob, why did you choose the name exposure zones?
We used to, in the previous version, we used to just use states, but exposure zones are more about where your certificate is kind of valid within. So it's just another reason, another sort of word for, I can't remember, you had the word on the previous slide there, Ted, but it's just kind of like a different zones in which your certificate can be valid. So it can be a state, as in North Carolina, or it can like go down into, various different jurisdictions.
Right. And so in AvaTax, the best way to think about it is an exposure zone is a tax authority who issued a certificate. And there are some cases where a single certificate will be valid for more than one zone. I don't know, Bob, do you have any examples of that off the top of your head? I've heard tell that there are some states that will share exemption certificates.
Yeah, there's an SST certificate and a MTC certificate, which are accepted as valid exemption certificates in several different states.
And just for those of you who don't know that acronym, SST is a very common acronym here at Avalara. It means Streamlined Sales Tax. And the founders of Avalara were actually involved in the creation of the Streamlined Sales Tax project. And what it was a collection of states that all decided to get together and make it simple, make it easy for people to understand taxes across multiple states. So what they did is they all agreed to come up with a governing board, right?
So yes, and the MTC is the multi-jurisdictional version of that. So that's the Uniform Sales and Use Tax Certificate multi-jurisdictional form, which is accepted by 38 states. Gotcha.
And if you're interested in streamlined sales tax, basically what will happen is if you sign up for SST, Avalara can help you file in all of these different states and jurisdictions in a very automated fashion. And it's a huge help because it means that your filing is much more simplified and it's lower cost than if you were to file individually. Because there's some states where you have a whole lot of forms you have to provide, and SST can really help simplify your work. If you're interested in it, please do talk to your customer account manager. SST is not something that you should just say, oh, hey, I'll sign up for it, why not? It does actually involve some compliance work, which is why it takes a little bit of time and effort to set that up. All right, so for today's conversation, we're mostly going to focus on the concept of exposure zones as states and jurisdictions. The CertCapture team has built some incredible enterprise functionality, and their enterprise functionality will allow you to define custom exposure zones, but if I was to go into that, I think I'd rapidly exceed my level of knowledge here. Bob knows this much better than I do, and I don't want to completely sidetrack or derail the conversation. But the first thing to do is, if you're curious what exposure zones exist, we have an API called List Certificate Exposure Zones. This API is defined on the developer site, and you can call it, and you can get a list. Here are all the jurisdictions that we recognize that issue resale certificates. So if you're building a program and you want to start gathering exemption certificates, that's a good place to start. You'll get a list of states, including things like Alabama, Alaska, outlying islands, Canadian provinces, stuff like that. So exposure zones are really a fundamental concept of exemption certificates because each certificate is going to be valid in at least one exposure zone. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yes.
Okay. So exposure zones, key thing to understand. Next one that I'd like to describe is we have a process called Cert Express. You can already get a hint that there's a fair amount of data and a fair amount of information. The way Bob was describing it before, for every certificate, you have to know a lot of stuff. So how can we make it easy for you to gather this data? Well, the way we help you with that is with this thing called Cert Express. Cert Express is a website that you can give to your customers, and your customers can upload their own certificates. And it allows your customer, it gives them kind of like a wizard, right? Right, Bob? It's like a little walk you through process.
Yeah, so we've got this really nice process of within the content that we have on the site where if you have, you're requesting a customer's name on a particular form, we can actually present a HTML version of that to say, hey, please enter your customer's name, first name, last name, address, and then that will be stamped on the form as part of the Cert Express process. So for all of the different fields that are required on a particular certificate, including a lot of the different logical steps. So, if you have a certificate that says, if you are, a Native American, check this box and then fill out the first three. Otherwise, you skip these options and go on to the next one. All of that logic is actually built into our Cert Express system.
Yeah, and this is stuff that would take you time and effort to build yourself. So definitely, we don't want our customers to have to write a ton of software. We want our customers to have a simple experience. We want them to get the right data the first time. So, let's imagine you're Home Depot. One of my favorite examples here is if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can see they've got an aisle, an entire checkout lane that's marked contractors checkout. And contractors generally are resellers. So I just hired someone to install a new TV in my home. So he most likely went to Home Depot or some other company, and he bought a huge spool of cable. And because he's buying that cable and he's going to sell it to me, he's going to provide a resale certificate. And Home Depot, it would totally waste a ton of time if every cashier had to gather every certificate. So what you really want to do is you want to have people register. And when they register, you give them access to Cert Express and they can upload their own certificates. And if they don't have a certificate, well, then they're not exempt. So this is a great way to simplify your website. If you're building a website and you're offering resales to people, give people Cert Express invites. Link them to the Cert Express page and let them publish their own certificates, because then they'll do it and they won't have to, you won't have to build this UI yourself. I should mention, actually, I didn't include a link to it, but I'm going to break out of the presentation really quickly. On the developer site, we actually have documentation for how to invite people to Cert Express, to use that Cert Express interface. If you go under API and then API reference, you'll see right here on the left-hand side, there's a set of API methods related to Cert Express invites. If you use these APIs, you can send your customers invitations to upload certificates, and all you have to do is call create Cert Express invitation, and the customer is invited to enter all of the data themselves. They don't have to do anything else. At the end of the process, At the end of the process, all of their certificates will be stored in your certificates account, and your exemptions will be there. Customers will get, charged the correct tax and not charge tax in states that are exempt. And I think this is a huge boon because I think this is the good experience to offer people. So let's pop back to the presentation. Sorry, hope that was good there. Jeff, are there any questions on the Cert Express side?
I am not seeing any right now.
Okay. Oh, I'm getting a question about how do you request an exposure zone? So what's happening here is that, let me sidetrack again very quickly to the documentation. In the documentation for creating a Cert Express invitation, you have an invitation model. And in this model, you can specify exposure zones. So you have a list of different exposure zones. So let's say a customer signs up and they're asking for you to, let's say they want to be exempt in 3 states. Well, you can pass in these 3 exposure zones that you collect from the List Exposure Zones API. So you could find the IDs for, say, Georgia, North Carolina, Alabama. You could pass those in, and then when your customer got an invitation to use Cert Express, Bob, tell me if I'm right here, it would remind them, hey, look, we need your certificates for these 3 states. Is that correct?
Correct. Up on the Cert Express UI, it would show the matching exposure zone saying, please fill out or upload a certificate for this particular zone.
Yeah, and this is making it easy on the person who's sending the invite, and it's also making it easy on the person who's filling it in, because Cert Express will walk them through everything. So you can specify, for example, I want to send my customer an invitation via email, or you could just say, hey, I want a web link that you can use, and then you can just give them a hot link directly in your website, directly to Cert Express. And I just think that's a great, convenient way to do things. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. If you have any other questions about the Cert Express, please feel free to mention them, and I'll make sure we get all of these things answered. So I'm a big fan of Cert Express. Let's go through a couple of other topics. Bob, what are exemption reasons?
They're just what they sound like. They're reasons for a exemption certificate. So resale, you got a couple of examples there, but they're the government mandated reasons of why you should be exempt from sales tax.
Yep. And I want to mention, my history here is I've worked for Avalara for a long time. I built Avalara's returns system, our managed returns filing system. One of the really interesting things that I've discovered through years of looking at thousands and thousands of customers' tax returns is that occasionally exemption reasons can sometimes be a trigger for an audit. We've had a couple of customers tell us that when they've all of a sudden used a completely new exemption reason that they hadn't used in the past, sometime their auditor had used that change to trigger an audit. So, I think exemption reasons are really interesting. There are some states that have a huge list. I remember Connecticut has like 50 or 60 different exemption reasons defined on their tax form. Have you ever seen that tax form, Bob?
I have not.
It's pretty crazy. I'm going to sidetrack just because this is something that I love talking about. There's a form called Connecticut OS 114. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. So this is what the tax form looks like. I spent a lot of time analyzing this because you have a very, very simple sales tax form, not complicated at all. But then you go to page 2. Look at this. Every single one of these things is an exemption, like an exemption reason or a breakout or something. It's like, oh my God, what's going on here? Total deductions. Oh, charitable religious organizations, out of state, machinery, aviation, I don't even know. And one of the problems that we discovered was that certain customers did not want us to fill out every one of these fields because sometimes the state of Connecticut would trigger an inquiry if you used one of these fields. So exemption reasons are very interesting to me. Good news is we have an API that lists what the exemption reasons are. And you can call this API and you can get a list of all of the system-defined exemption reasons. And I put some examples here on the page, but I'm sure everyone who's involved in taxes knows a little bit of what exemption reasons are. Obviously, the most common one is exempt for purpose of resale, right? That's pretty much the main one everyone asks about. So these others exist, but you may not encounter them in day-to-day. And every time I see this diplomat one, I can't help thinking of that Lethal Weapon 2. It's just hilarious. I constantly go back to Mel Gibson, getting into a shootout with the criminal from the
South Africa.
Yeah, South African embassy. It's freaking 80s movies, man. You think of them, they stick with your mind forever. Okay, so exemption reason. Anything else you want to add here, Bob?
I just checked, and we do not support the Connecticut. Is it C114?
Mm-hmm.
We support several. It looks like about 10 to 15 Connecticut ones, but that is not one of them. Probably, I think we support the individual ones for each individual exempt reason, but not probably the giant blanket one.
Well, I should mention Avalara does support that form, but I'm pretty sure that some of those things on the form are encoded as tax rates of 0 rather than certificate-based exemptions.
Right.
So I don't know that everything on that form is essentially a certificate-based exemption. There are other things that cause, like some products are exempt for product-based reasons, right? If there's any questions here.
So it looks like a comment from Matt McNeil is that it's not an exemption form, it is a return form.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore is not supported.
All right. Okay, so let's move on from here. Next thing I'd like to mention is that an exemption certificate has a couple of normal limitations. And I don't know, Bob, do you want to go into this one? I think you could do a better job of explaining this page than me.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you can give the mic to Matt McNeil as well, he can probably do an even better job than myself. But just looking at the purchase order, so you can have a certificate that is assigned to a specific purchase order number. And and then you can also have percentages, so you can exempt by percentage. And then we have a concept of expiration and an effective date. So you can have a future certificate.
Gotcha. And my understanding is that like cert capture is going to remind you when certificates are about to become exempt, and there's tools for managing that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you set up certificates, this is one of the things that the CertExpress website will walk you through. The expiration and effective dates, I believe, are part of the CertExpress process. And again, that's a good reason for you to build your software using that the CertExpress invitation method. Next thing I'd like to talk about is, let's say you decide to implement the API to create certificates yourself. One of the key things that you need to choose is what type of certificate you're going to track. Now, my understanding is every single certificate has to have an auditable image. Right, Bob? Like you absolutely have to have something that you can produce in the case of an audit.
Correct. You have to have something on file.
And like in the API call, you can choose whether you're going to provide JPEG images or PDF images. But then there's also a third option. How do offline certificates work?
So you can have a certificate record that is not associated with a physical certificate that you have on file within Cert Capture, but that wouldn't be valid for an audit, if that makes sense. So it's just like a way to meet the minimum requirements to have the record in the system, but it wouldn't actually link to anything we have on file.
Right. So like if I had like an external storage system or an external audit repository, I used to work for a company that had a Sarbanes-Oxley requirement that they had like one single audit storage system, and like everything that was necessary for audits had to be stored in that. So if you were using that, you would then like put the ID number of the document in that storage system, in that offline certificate file name, right?
I mean, yeah, that's one way to do it.
So let me just link out of here. I'm going to pop over to the developer website, and we can set aside the Connecticut form. But over here, what you'll see is that next to Cert Express invites, there's also a list of certificate APIs. So if you decide that you want to create certificates yourself in your program, this would be something that would be useful if you were building a plugin for an accounting system, or if you wanted people to be able to manage certificates directly in their like online e-commerce store. You could call this API, and you could provide the necessary data in the certificate model. And what you'll see is, we have an explanation for what all of these fields are and how they all work together. But you'll eventually see, for example, you'll see the PDF and the pages and the file name. And these fields are how you would track the location of the certificate image. So we specify in the documentation that you must provide a file name, a PDF, or an array of JPEG pages. You have to pick one of the three of those. All right. Returning on to the presentation here. I do want to mention that Cert Capture, the AvaTax Exemption Certificates API, will give you an error if you do not choose what type of certificate you're going to upload. You have to pick one of those three. If you don't, you'll get an error saying it's missing that. Let's also mention, once you've got a certificate, in order for it to be useful, you have to link it to customers. Now, Bob, I want to give you a chance to explain this, but one of the really powerful things about the exemption certificate system is that you can have many-to-many joins. One customer can have many certificates, one certificate can have many customers, and you can join bill tos and ship tos in the system. Bob, you could probably do a better job of this than me, right?
Well, I mean, I think you did a pretty good summary. So,
oh, come on, man, you can talk. I don't want to cover everything. You're the guy who built this. You deserve the credit. Your guys have been working on certificates for a long time. I threw together a PowerPoint in an hour or so. I shouldn't be the one getting the credit for this.
Well, it's very nice of you to say, Ted. So yes, I mean, we do support the concept of a single customer can have many certificates. So you can have several different certificates for various different jurisdictions and various different exempt reasons, and a single certificate can also have many different customers on it. And you can also have a. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, why is this useful? I mean, I know a couple of reasons on my side, but like, why would you use a certificate joined to more than one customer?
I think that's out of my scope of knowledge as far as the tax reasons go.
Well, I'd say one reason is that sometimes companies have subsidiary business entities, and I've worked in a variety of circumstances. Just for fun, Activision has a division called Blizzard. I used to work in the video game industry, and the actual business name of Blizzard is Davidson and Associates, because of the way that their company was structured and the way that everything got put together. I have, fun stories about my time in the video game industry, and it was a ton of fun, but you wind up with these companies where they have multiple child entities that are not really visible. So sometimes you'll have a certificate, and that certificate will name a business entity, but from your customer perspective, it may be valid for more than one customer. So that's the way that I would use it myself. Sorry, back to you, Bob. Sorry.
And yes, and so you can have a bill to customer and a ship to customer that are two separate customer entities within our system.
Mm-hmm.
So, very
all right.
powerful.
So to go into the API part of this, we decided, based upon some consultation, we were going to call the API for these things link and unlink. So the concept here is that you can call the link API and you can pass it a certificate ID and a customer ID, and it will connect the two of them together. You can pass an unlink, you can call unlink, and you can disconnect the two of them. So the API will allow you to do that. And by using the word link and unlink, we're trying to make it clear that what you're doing is you're not deleting a certificate, you're not deleting a customer, you're just connecting the two of them. Jeff, are there any questions on this topic?
Not seeing any now.
Okay. I can see that there's some discussion going on, but I'll wait until there's a specific question there to sidetrack. So this many-to-many join is something that you could use in the Cert Capture website, or if you wanted to, you could call the API yourself. But you'd have to come up with, like, how does it make sense for you? If a customer defines multiple business entities and then they set up a certificate, you could call the link API to define that. I believe we also have some features that allow you to use define the linkage in the original create call, just to simplify the number of API calls you have to make. So this many-to-many join system is pretty powerful, and you can find it in the developer documentation under the API.
Looks like we do have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The question is, what is the primary identifier for a customer and customer dollar amount?
Okay, so the primary identifier for a customer is called customer code. We also have a unique ID number as well, but let me go to the developer site and show how that works. Many of you are familiar with the concept of transactions in AvaTax. And what I'll do is I'll show you, this is what a normal transaction looks like in AvaTax. I'll fill in the sample data here. What you'll notice is I have a company code. That company code refers to the seller. So the store who's selling you something, their code is called default. You have a customer over here, and the customer is identified by the code ABC. So what does that mean? That means in AvaTax, we're saying that we're selling something to customer ABC. So now, if there is a certificate that is an exemption certificate that's connected to customer ABC, and that certificate is valid, and that certificate applies to this transaction, then that transaction is going to be exempt. So this customer code right here connects to, let's go over here to the customer object. It connects to the customer code field here in the customer object. So that's the connection between the two of these. So if you want to use the exemption certificate behavior, the goal of designing this is we wanted exemptions to be automatic if these codes matched. So you set up a customer. So let's say you're running Home Depot, and Jim's general contractor shows up. Jim's general contractor says, hey, I'd like to sign up as a reseller. So you then say, I'm going to create a customer code. It's called Jim's general contractor. Maybe that the code is all one word, Jim's general contractor. So that's the customer record. Then you send Jim a Cert Express invite. Hey, Jim, please send us your exemption certificate. You don't have to do anything else. When Jim goes through Cert Express, he's going to fill out his exemption certificate. He's going to provide you with his certificate. And that certificate is going to be saved, and it's going to be automatically linked to his customer code. Bob, tell me if I'm giving anything misleading here. The goal is that Jim is going to upload his certificate, and it's going to be automatically tied to his customer code. And the next time you create a transaction for Jim's general contractor, the next time you create a transaction, if Jim has given you his exemption certificate, he's going to be exempt. So once you've set up the customer code, it's supposed to be automatic. Bob, I heard your phone hiccup there. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, as long as it matches the jurisdiction and the exempt reason, and the certificate is valid and within and effective.
Yeah. So, of course, exemption certificates are not just like, do you have it on file? It's also, is it valid? Is it valid for this date? Is it valid for this, and so on, right? All right. So an example of this would be, let's say I'm going to call create customers. So I can say I'm going to do Jim's general contractor here, and I could create this customer record. Jim, the contractor would be the name. You could put in some variety of, details, his email address and stuff like that. So all of this information would then help you to then set up the Cert Express invite. Because then you go over here to Cert Express invites, and you'd say, I'm going to create a Cert Express invitation. And I'm going to send it to Jim, Jim's general contractor, and so on. So those three APIs, create customers, create Cert Express invitation, and create transaction, they will all connect together to make a working exemption system. So if you call create customer when somebody registers as a customer, if you call create Cert Express invitation to invite them to upload their exemption certificates, then they will be exempt automatically, provided that they've filled out the correct data. And if they complain to you and they say, why are you charging me sales tax? We say, well, we're charging you sales tax based upon the exemption certificates you've uploaded. If you'd like us to give a new certificate that's valid, please do that. So the goal is to reduce your work and give you a way to allow customers to manage this themselves. Because I'll tell you, my wife worked for a distributor a while, and she spent nearly all her time on the phone calling up people asking for their exemption certificates. It was so frustrating. She would spend all day long calling up people who should have given their certificates at the time that they bought something and trying to get them before the auditor showed up the next day. And, we're trying to design a system to make it easy for you to handle that. So that's the purpose behind this. All right. I had a slide here, which was going to remind me to jump over to the interactive Try It Now feature, but so far your questions have had me jumping back and forth to the documentation all the time. I don't know that I need to cover this here, but this was going to be my quick example. This is one way of creating a certificate. So if I say I've got a certificate and it's stored in my document retention system using this GUID, this is how I would do it. So let's say I've got an exemption certificate and it's valid in the state of Washington. It's an exposure certificate. This is the file name. So this is what the API call would look like for creating a certificate. But at this point, I've already sidetracked myself a lot. So maybe I'm not going to completely, I think I'll just skip this slide for today.
He said we have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the question is, we have a serious issue where our tax calculation engine accepts the customer code and ship to, ship from. Mm-hmm. The issue is that we have to ensure that a given customer code in Avalara is only associated with a single exemption type, for example, for the federal government. We can't have a cert for customer code X mapped to a fraternal organization and also something else, for example, a nonprofit charitable org. How can Avalara help enforce this?
Oh boy, that's a pretty detailed question. That's a good question. Okay, so this is an area where I believe talking to support about the setup in Cert Capture, I don't know an API that you could call to do that. And unfortunately, my experience in this is mostly limited to how the API works. But what I will tell you is that you should be able to enforce limitations like this, or you should be able to audit it and detect when somebody is uploading invalid certificates. Bob, is this something that you're familiar with?
Yeah, so it looks like our sort of data entry and certificate validation process would actually catch this. Mm-hmm. And so we don't consider a certificate valid until you've actually had someone physically looking at it.
Mm-hmm. So essentially what's happening is if a customer is uploading a certificate that's kind of sketchy, or the certificate is maybe not appropriate for them, you really need to validate that. So just being able to have a human involved in the certificate verification process is a pretty powerful feature of cert capture. I don't know that I can show that to you in the API, but I know that there are team members in cert capture and in professional services that will show you how to set up this kind of a pipeline for approvals and review. So that's really the direction that I'd suggest. So just a question to the person who asked that. Have you talked to your account manager about this topic? Your account manager could probably either point you to some documentation specifically, or point you to a service that our company offers to help validate these certificates. Have you talked to someone about this? And Jeff, I'll look to you to get their response. But I'd like to use this as an opportunity to point on the developer site. We have a page called Developer Support Options. And one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to help customers get to the right type of help. Because I can answer a lot of API questions, but like I don't know specifically exactly what the process is. So Jeff, did we get a response on that?
We did. So from James Johnson, he says that this concern he has, the customer keeps getting deferred. James, can you provide a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to take your information down. We're going to follow up right after this webinar is over, because there's nothing that I hate more than hearing that customers can't get an answer. Because we've spent a lot of time and effort to build a system that can solve these problems. We need to make sure that you're getting the help that you need. So it sounds like what you're looking for is you're looking for a way to enforce restrictions on what types of certificates a customer can use. So from the question that you asked a minute ago, it sounds like you've got a general contractor and you're worried that that general contractor is going to upload, say, a diplomatic exemption. Is that right? You know, because like clearly you would say, wait a minute, you're a general contractor. Why can you set up a foreign embassy diplomacy certificate? Is that right? I would be worried about that too. But at the same time, clearly this is a process of validation. If somebody walks up and says, hey, I'm exempt, here's my certificate, and they hand you a receipt for a donut at the local donut store, clearly that has to be validated and rejected. So my interpretation of your question is that we need to help you come up with a process for reviewing and rejecting certificates that are not valid. So Jeff is taking your information down, and we're going to email you after this. We're going to get in touch with your customer account manager. But I'd also like to point out here, because we get a lot of questions in the API team that are things that we can't directly answer out of programming, this is the type of solution that we're looking at. We have a variety of different ways to get help. If you need help using your software, we have the ability to open a support case. And when you open a support case, you can type in your issue, you can type in your email address, very, very simple stuff. This opens a ticket on our side, and it activates our support team. Some of our support team members, I think I've even seen some names pop up on this call. I think we even have some support team members on this call, but they are the first point of contact. They'll look at that question, and a lot of them have seen and heard these types of questions before. They'll be able to answer it. If not, we have some variety of help center content here. So let's just type in, does Avalara Cert Capture validate the legitimacy of certificates submitted by our customers? We do not do this as part of functionality out of the box. We do offer a managed services package that will involve our team doing this for you. So one of the key things here is that you can actually hire us and we will verify your certificates. So this is an option that's available, and it's something that you could definitely subscribe to. and our team will verify that each certificate is legitimate. Other types of support, you could also post on the forums. We have a feature called the Avalara Community Forums, and we have a lot of active customers that are asking questions. And if you see something that is interesting or an interesting topic, you can search for it or you can ask your question. Our general policy is that we're going to respond to these questions within about 2 business days. And we work with a variety of people all throughout the company. We focus on getting answers for these questions, and we focus on making sure that if customers are asking questions we can't answer, that means that we need to improve our documentation.
It looks like James responded.
Yeah.
So he says the problem is them uploading 2 different exemption cert types because the consumers of our tax engine can't specify the exemption type. They can only specify the customer code. So we have to ensure only a single exemption type is loaded into Avalara for a given customer code.
Oh, okay. So if your tax engine can't handle multiple exemption types, well then the key thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to set up a validation process. Right now, there is no feature in the API that allows you to just flag and automatically reject certificates based upon logic that you designate. Cert capture is designed based upon a workflow concept. So when a certificate comes in, it's intended to be reviewed, and then it's intended to be validated and approved. So our design for handling these sorts of problems is that you're given all of the tools necessary to review these certificates as they come in. Or if you don't want to do that yourself, you could contact our team and hire us to do validation on our side. So part of the way that you do that is we offer professional services. We have a very talented team of people that do professional services for a variety of different compliance topics. And we offer features that will help you in your tax process, in your certificate process, or in your development process. Even as far as just registering you to file tax in different jurisdictions, we can offer help in a variety of these different areas. And I've worked with these people. They're pretty talented folks, and I can wholeheartedly recommend them. So if you wind up with a challenge, they're a great set of people to talk to. Finally, I'd like to mention that we have a Crush conference that's coming up in 2018. If you're interested in this topic, and if you'd like to hang out with us a little bit further, I know I've met some people from a variety of companies every year, and I love talking to everyone to hear their use cases, because this helps me find things that I can improve in the documentation. So James, one of the things that I'd like to do about this is I'd like to extend the API documentation to make it clear how you can use the workflow features of cert capture in order to validate certificates. So with that, I'm going to take a ticket to improve some documentation afterwards. But we'd love to see you all at Crush 2018. I'm going to be hosting a variety of API sessions. We have an entire developer track in the 2018 Crush conference that's coming up in May. So if you'd like to look at it, we have a great developer track that I helped to design with some team members here. We have an entire hour-long session that covers some of these same topics here, but it goes into more detail. We have topics on VAT and connector development. Bob, have you found out, are you going to be at Crush? Do you know anything more?
I don't think so, because my wife is very pregnant and will probably be giving birth.
Oh, goodness. Well, congratulations. I hope it goes smoothly.
Yeah.
Perhaps there won't be
I'll either have she'll either be very pregnant or I'll have a newborn. So
it's fantastic.
I don't think I'll be attending this year. Yeah.
Well, we'll miss you, but Crush is always a ton of fun, and I'm sure we'll see you at 2019 then. So
Absolutely.
at this point, I've reached the great. Thanks. At this point, I've reached the end of my prepared comments. So I'd just like to open it up. James, thank you for that interesting and involved question. Are there any other questions that people would like us to cover? We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm getting one question about Cert Express hot links. So let me go back to the documentation for Cert Express. I had it open somewhere. I'll just have to browse to it. So one of the things that you'll see is in the example API call for Cert Express, you'll notice that it specifies delivery method email. So the question that I got was, how do I send someone an invitation to Cert Express and do it via a link in my website? Well, that's controlled using this delivery method parameter. So let's go over to the documentation here and let's see what the delivery method parameter is. It's an enum, which is, it's called an enumerated list of values. So what are the options? You can choose email, fax, or down. You know, that's actually not a great name. I think I understand why you're asking this question. So this download link is the one where you would give a link in the API. So you know what? This is actually a good opportunity for improvement right here. You know, I worked with my team to write this documentation. This is not as good as I would like it to be. I would like to make it really clear. If you choose email, Avalara Cert Capture will send an email to the person you specified with this invitation to Cert Express. If you send a fax, Bob, why do we support faxes?
A lot of contractors exist solely of fax communication. So a lot of people that we have
2018.
Just use. Yes, I'm well aware, Ted. It's an ongoing pain point for us as developers, but it's a couple of our customers just exist solely off sending each other faxes. So we do support faxes.
So did you really have to write software to have your program send a fax?
We sure did.
Really? I didn't even know that was an option. My goodness. Okay, so what happens if I say fax? Like, what does the customer get? Is it just the same? Is it the same thing that they would get via email? Is it different?
Correct. It's the same cover letter with the same details, and it'll just, so instead of clicking a link in the email, you have to go in and type in your set, or you just go to Cert Express and enter in your unique code.
Gotcha. And then, of course, the third option here is download. And download is probably not the best name for this, but if you pass the value download, then you're going to get a hot link. It's going to be a URL. And then you can put that URL in your user interface, or you can send it to the customer through whatever other means you want. You know, you could send it via, you know, any other, you know, text message or whatever. But it's basically a URL. And when you click that URL, you wind up on certexpress.com, right? And not only that, but it also jumps in with the request code. So I think it's just a shortcut for, you know, jumping into this page. So to answer your question, the overall summary is you call, which tabs I have it open on? You call Cert Express invite, you set delivery method to download, and then you will get back in the response a link. So what does it look like? I'm not sure if this response has it. Here's the invitation. I'm pretty sure it's something like, oh, here it is, request link. That's what it is. So that's what you should be looking for. In your response, you should get a field called request link, and that request link is a URL that will send you to Cert Express. So thank you. Jeff, can you help me take a note to do that?
Absolutely.
Thanks. All right, do we have any other questions before we wrap up the webinar? We've got about 6-7 more minutes left. You know what? I think maybe we are running out of questions for today. Hey, Bob, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to talk about? Are there any great new features in the roadmap that you're authorized to chat about?
Not around the API features, but we are really getting the microscope looking at our Cert Express website and having a really good look at any improvements that we can make on that. So as far as the functionality, it won't change too much, but really just improving some of that workflow there.
Great. Well, I know that's probably my favorite feature out of all of it, because everything that you do in the Cert Express website is it's functionality and usability that we don't have to teach to all of our developers. So, if somebody out there is implementing this API, then you will get so much mileage out of using the Cert Express website. There are so many different questions and so many different drop downs and things. Just using Cert Express is a huge convenience there. All right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. I'm really excited. I love the fact that this API is integrated and that people can use AvaTax and Cert Capture seamlessly. This has got to be one of my favorite features over the past year.
It's been a pleasure, Ted. It's very nice of you to say.
Great, and thank you so much, Jeff, for facilitating this. Jeff, manager of the marketing team for developers, we really appreciate you putting these things together and publishing and telling people about these webinars. I had a ton of fun. Thank you, everyone, for coming and hanging out with us. We hope you've enjoyed your time. We hope this has helped you learn more about AvaTax and about exemption certificates. Just as a quick follow-up, we are publishing all of our webinars now on the developer site. So if you go to webinars right here, you'll see our upcoming webinars. Next week, we have a webinar on robust connector design with one of my other favorite people here, Charlie Morissette. He's on the connectors team. He's worked with a variety of different accounting systems and has helped design connectors for a lot of enterprise customers. We have a bunch of other good ones that are coming up in February. And the recording for today's webinar will be hosted here on the recordings page in just a little while. So if you missed a webinar, you're always welcome to go back there and take a look at it. Thank you, and have yourself a marvelous Tuesday. It is Tuesday, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, glad to hear it. Thank you, everyone.